Imagine for a second that you are walking past one of those massive, sprawling construction sites. Maybe it's a new high-speed rail line or an airport terminal.
Or one of those crazy skyline-altering skyscrapers.
Yeah, exactly. So you look at the cranes, the thousands of workers, the endless pallets of materials, and, well, you notice something. Nothing seems to be moving.
The project is months or maybe even years behind schedule.
Right, and costs are just spiraling into the stratosphere. And as you walk by, you have to wonder, when things go this spectacularly wrong and the blame game gets too complicated to untangle, who actually pays for the chaos?
I mean, that is a multi-million, sometimes multi-billion-dollar question, and the answer rarely makes the evening news.
No, it really doesn't.
It usually just lies buried in mountains of legal and financial paperwork, debated behind closed doors in international arbitration centers.
Okay, well, let's unpack this. Today's deep dive is exploring the ultimate, highly controversial legal shortcut that contractors use when that exact scenario happens.
It is a fascinating topic.
It really is. When a mega project goes off the rails and the timeline is completely shredded, we are looking at something called the global claim.
Right, which sounds intense just as a phrase.
Yeah. And even if you have never picked up a hard hat or set foot on a job site, I mean, the legal mechanics of how the built world gets financed and fought over is absolutely fascinating.
Totally. And to frame our discussion today, we have a stack of highly specialized legal and industry analyses in front of us.
We've got some great sources.
We do. We are pulling insights from the Society of Construction Law's Delay and Disruption Protocol, the BCDR International Arbitration Review, and some landmark international case law.
Stuff that fundamentally changed how judges view these multi-million-dollar construction disputes, right?
Exactly. It really reshaped the entire landscape.
But before we jump into the controversy of a global claim, we really have to establish how standard construction disputes are supposed to work.
Right, the baseline.
Yeah, the traditional approach is highly linear. It is all about cause and effect. So if you are a contractor and the project owner forgets to secure a crucial permit and that delays a concrete pour by 3 days, well, you file a standard claim.
It's a very clean process.
Clean, right. You link a specific cause, like the delayed permit, to a specific effect, maybe like $10,000 in idle equipment costs.
And the bedrock of traditional contract law demands that exact level of causation. I mean, the burden of proof rests entirely on the party asking for money.
You have to show your work.
Exactly. You must establish an unbroken chain showing how event A led directly to financial loss. B, but the reality of a modern mega project just obliterates that simplicity.
Because you aren't just dealing with one delayed permit, are you?
Not at all. A contractor might face, 75 design changes, a 100-year flood, late architectural drawings, and sudden site access restrictions.
It's a total nightmare.
Right, and it's all overlapping and compounding simultaneously over a 5-year period.
Yeah. Which brings us to the core concept of our deep dive today. Our sources highlight a working definition by Julian Bailey, who is a recognized authority in this space.
He really is.
He defines a global claim as a demand for extra time or money based on a whole number of events that the owner is responsible for, but where it is impossible, or at least highly impractical, to link the actual financial impact to each individual event.
It's just too tangled.
Exactly. It makes me think of like hosting a massive outdoor barbecue. Imagine you were throwing this huge party and a sudden terrible rainstorm completely ruins it.
Okay, I like this analogy. The weather being an event outside of your control, much like a project owner, causing sweeping delays.
Right. So trying to file a standard cause and effect claim would be like trying to figure out exactly which specific raindrop ruined your hot dog.
Oh, wow.
And which specific raindrop watered down the potato salad, and then pricing them out individually. You just can't separate the raindrops. The events are too tangled.
So a global claim is essentially giving up on pricing the individual raindrops. You just sue the weatherman for the entire cost of the ruined party.
Yes, that is exactly it.
And the mechanics of how they calculate that ruined party are shockingly blunt. Contractors often use what's called a total cost claim formula.
Which sounds pretty straightforward.
It is, almost too straightforward. They take the total actual cost of the entire completed project, subtract the original contract price they agreed to at the very beginning, and just demand the owner cover that total difference.
Wait, really? It completely bypasses the traditional legal burden of proof.
Totally. Instead, forensically proving every single line item of damage. The contractor points to the overall financial wreckage and just asks the employer to make them whole.
I have to push back here, though. Because if the formula is just Total cost minus original bid. Why wouldn't every single contractor just do that on every project?
Right, it seems like a massive loophole.
Yeah, like what stops a contractor from just losing money through their own bad management, blaming a bunch of random events on the owner, and suing for the difference?
Well, the construction industry is keenly aware of that exact risk. Industry bodies actively try to standardize dispute resolution to prevent contractors from using global claims as a convenient cover-up.
They don't want it to be a get-out-of-jail-free card.
Exactly. The most prominent standard bearer we looked at is the Society of Construction Law, or the SCL.
And they have strong feelings about this.
Very strong. Their delay and disruption protocol, specifically the 2017 edition, takes an incredibly hostile stance toward global claims.
They practically despise them. I mean, the SEL's argument is that if contractors just did their jobs properly, if they maintained accurate, comprehensive daily records of what was happening on the site down to the hour, they would be completely capable of establishing that clear causal link.
Yes. They're essentially arguing that a global claim isn't born from an impossible situation. It is born from a disorganized contractor.
It makes a lot of sense.
And the protocol draws a very fine, crucial distinction here. It concedes that a genuine physical impossibility to separate events can be legally valid.
Okay, so they acknowledge the raindrops?
They do, but it explicitly states that a global claim can never be an excuse for poor contract administration.
Right. You can't just lose your receipts and say, well, it's impossible to know.
Exactly. A contractor cannot use it to mask the fact that they failed to keep contemporary records or that they missed the strict contractual deadlines to file standard delay notices.
So let's look at the reality on the ground. A contractor fundamentally mismanages the paperwork, loses their material receipts, or, brings in an inefficient labor crew. Costs spiral.
A classic disaster scenario.
Right. And the SEL is basically saying the global claim is just a massive smokescreen to sweep all that internal incompetence into a pile, point at a few minor employer delays, and demand a huge payout.
Which is exactly why project employers fight these claims so aggressively. I mean, the traditional legal norm requires the person asking for money to prove why they deserve it.
Yeah, that's just basic fairness.
But a global claim flips that dynamic entirely. By aggregating all the losses into one massive lump sum and claiming, hey, it's all your fault, the contractor forces the employer to untangle the mess.
Oh, wow. So the burden shifts to the employer.
Yes. The employer is suddenly burdened with forensically going through years of project records to prove why the global approach isn't warranted.
That sounds incredibly expensive.
It transfers a massive analytical risk and millions of dollars in legal accounting costs directly onto the employer.
But wait. If the major industry protocols hate them, and project employers obviously fight them to the bitter end, what happens when these claims actually make it into a courtroom?
You'd think they'd get thrown out.
I mean, you'd think any judge looking at this would just dismiss the case and demand itemized receipts.
Historically, judges did exactly that. The judiciary viewed global claims with profound skepticism.
Because of that bedrock of contract law, causation.
Exactly. Judges were entirely unwilling to bend on that principle. They demanded strict individual causal links between the owner's breach of contract and the specific financial damage suffered by the contractor.
So if you brought a tangled mess to a judge back then, your claim was just dismissed.
Pretty much, yeah. But our sources reveal a massive shift in judicial philosophy. Despite what the strict SCL protocol recommends, courts are starting to take a surprisingly lenient, pragmatic approach to the mess.
It is wild how much things have changed. I was reading about a 2014 decision from the New South Wales Court of Appeal in Australia.
Oh, that is a huge one.
Yeah, the court ruled there is nothing inherently wrong with global or total cost claims. They basically stated that a common sense approach is required.
And that Australian decision really echoed a major turning point that occurred in the UK a few years earlier.
Right, the Walter Lilly case.
Yes, the 2012 case of Walter Lilly and Company Limited versus Mackay. It is studied intensely by construction lawyers because it shattered traditional English law regarding global claims.
In Walter Lilly, the judge ruled that a claimant actually is not obligated to establish the absolute impossibility of linking cause and effect before they are allowed to make a global claim.
Which is a huge departure from the past.
Massive. The judge essentially said that as long as the events that cause the financial loss aren't the contractor's own fault, well, the court will entertain the total cost calculation.
That is a direct contradiction to the SCL protocol.
Yeah, the industry guideline says keep better records, but the highest courts are saying we get it, construction is chaotic.
Because the court in Walter Lilly was grappling with the fundamental role of the justice system in massive commercial disputes. I mean, does a judge demand theoretical textbook perfection?
Knowing it might be physically impossible on a chaotic 5-year mega project.
Exactly. Or do they prioritize practical resolution? The judgment recognized a difficult, truth-demanding, impossible levels of proof, essentially gives project employers a free pass for their own breaches of contract.
That makes sense, because if an employer causes a dozen overlapping delays, like changing designs, withholding site access, failing to deliver materials, it shouldn't be the contractor who gets bankrupted.
Right. Not simply because the employer's delays were too tangled to separate neatly on a spreadsheet.
So the courts will at least hear a global claim now. They acknowledge the reality of the raindrop problem.
They do, yes.
But based on these legal analyses, getting a judge to listen to a global claim and actually winning one are two entirely different things. Launching a global claim is universally described in our sources as a claim of last resort.
Because it is incredibly fragile. I mean, the entire legal premise of a global claim relies on the assertion that the employer is responsible for the total loss.
So returning to our barbecue analogy, how does the employer, the weatherman being sued for the ruined party, actually defend themselves? They're staring down a massive lump sum demand.
Well, the employer's primary strategy is to prove the contractor brought some of the ruin upon themselves.
Ah, so they shift the blame back.
Right. The employer doesn't have to prove the storm didn't happen. They just have to prove the contractor dropped the hot dogs in the dirt hours before the first raindrop ever fell.
That is a brilliant way to look at it.
If the employer can prove they were not responsible for a significant dominant cause of the delay, the entire global claim shatters.
The all-or-nothing risk. So if there is a massive delay and the employer proves, hey, part of this financial loss occurred because you couldn't find enough skilled labor?
Or your own site manager ordered the wrong materials.
Right. Then the chain is broken. The contractor caused a portion of their own losses. And once the court sees that, the foundational assumption that the employer owes the total cost difference is completely destroyed.
Yep. The courts have established rigid guardrails to prevent contractors from recovering costs for self-inflicted wounds.
What kind of guardrails are we talking about here?
Our sources highlight former Victorian Supreme Court Justice David Byrne, QC. He laid out 3 strict conditions that a total cost claim must satisfy to survive this employer pushback.
Okay, let's hear them.
The very first requirement is that the original contract price must have been realistic.
But wait, how does an employer legally prove a bid was unrealistic years after they already accepted it, signed the contract, and let the contractor build the project?
It requires a forensic dissection of the initial tender documents. Employers will hire quantum experts to look at what the contractor estimated for labor, materials, and time before the project began.
And then they compare it to industry averages at that time.
Exactly. If the contractor deliberately underbid, knowing they would lose money just to win the job, they cannot use a global claim at the end of the project to magically recover that initial deficit.
So they can't just fix a bad business decision.
No, the baseline for the calculation has to be a genuine mathematically sound estimate of what the work should have cost.
Which immediately kills the strategy of lowballing a bid and suing for the difference later.
It does.
Okay, so Justice Byrne's second condition is that the actual cost incurred by the contractor must be reasonable. But again, reasonable seems incredibly subjective when a project is spiraling out of control. I mean, how do courts even measure that?
The courts look closely at mitigation. When the project went off the rails, did the contractor actively try to stop the financial bleeding?
Okay, so if a permit was delayed, did the contractor negotiate reduced rental rates for their idle cranes?
Right, or did they just let the meter run at a premium daily price, knowing they were going to sue the employer for the total cost later anyway?
So the court demands evidence that the contractor's spending was rational and defensive, not careless?
Exactly. And then there is the third condition, which is honestly an almost impossible hurdle. Absolutely no factor other than compensable events caused the price difference.
Oh, wow. None at all.
None. Plus, if there are any financial amounts that can be explicitly linked to a specific event, the contractor must remove them from the messy global bucket and process them as normal individual claims.
That third condition really feels like the fatal blow for most global claims. I mean, it is statistically near impossible on a multi-year mega project that the contractor bears 0% of the blame for any cost overruns.
It's basically a unicorn scenario.
Right. If there was an unexpectedly long rainy season, if a key subcontractor went bankrupt, if the global supply chain hit a snag completely unrelated to the employer's actions, any of those independent factors invalidate the assumption that the employer is solely responsible.
That is precisely why it remains a desperate high-risk measure.
But, everything we just discussed about strict judicial tests and high-risk legal gambles sort of goes out the window the second you cross a border.
Oh, absolutely. Infrastructure is a very global business.
Yeah. The exact same mega project could be happening in London, Sydney, New York, or Dubai. Does geography fundamentally change the viability of a global claim?
It redefines the entire strategy.
Yeah.
The legal culture of the jurisdiction you operate in completely dictates how you argue a dispute.
And we looked at a comparative analysis from the BCDR International Arbitration Review that contrasts these international approaches, right?
We did, and the divergence is just stark. Even with that landmark Walser-Lilly case establishing a more pragmatic approach in the UK, the scope of global claims in British courts remains practically limited.
So judges are lenient in theory, but highly strict on the actual facts.
Yes. And in the United States, the resistance is immense. U.S. law only permits what they term total loss claims in exceptionally rare circumstances.
They really don't like it over there.
Not at all. U.S. courts vehemently prefer other, highly specific mathematical methodologies to calculate damages. They actively reject the blunt instrument of the total cost formula.
But contrast that strictness with the environment in the Middle East. The BCDR review identifies jurisdictions like Egypt and the United Arab Emirates as areas ripe for development regarding global claims.
It's a totally different legal landscape.
It is wild to think about the implications of this. The complex legal obstacles and strict burden of proof a contractor would face in London or New York are just not as prominent under Egyptian and UAE civil laws.
Right. The tribunals there are potentially much more receptive to entertaining a global approach.
The divergence makes perfect sense, though, when you consider the local construction environment. Look at the unprecedented scale, speed, and density of construction in places like the UAE over the last 2 decades.
It is staggering.
The sheer volume of concurrent mega projects creates an environment where delays, supply chain disruptions, and overlapping logistical nightmares are almost guaranteed.
And the legal frameworks in these regions are actively adapting to the unique, hyper-accelerated reality of modern infrastructure growth.
So they are perhaps more willing to accept that on a $3 billion project built at breakneck speed, forcing a contractor to separate every single cause and effect is simply a legal fiction.
It is a profound realization for anyone listening who works in global finance or project management.
Yeah, if you are an executive at an international construction firm, the exact same delay, caused by the exact same factors, could bankrupt your company in the U.S. because the court demands impossible, itemized proof.
Exactly. Yet that identical delay could result in a massive project-saving payout in the UAE simply because of how the local legal framework interprets the messy reality of the site.
Your financial survival isn't just about how well you build. It's entirely dependent on how local courts allow you to argue when things break down.
Understanding these jurisdictional nuances is fundamental for anyone involved in funding, insuring, or managing international infrastructure. You just cannot apply a London legal strategy to a Dubai construction site and expect to survive.
So, synthesizing everything we've explored from the sources today, we've traced this from the muddy waters of a delayed job site, through the fierce resistance of the SCL protocol, into the shifting precedents of the UK and Australian courts.
And all the way across the world to the pragmatic tribunals of the Middle East.
The overarching takeaway seems to be that while the global claim is heavily criticized as a legal shield for sloppy management, it serves an unavoidable purpose.
It really does. Sometimes it is the only practical mechanism left to achieve a functioning resolution.
Right. When the mathematics of delay get too muddy, the global claim provides a blunt but necessary way to keep contractors from going bankrupt.
Which allows these critical infrastructure projects to actually reach completion, rather than rotting in endless litigation over impossible-to-prove details.
It is an inherently imperfect solution to an impossibly complex logistical problem.
Perfectly said.
But I want to leave you with a final thought to ponder today, something that builds on the very foundation of this entire legal concept. We established that the whole premise of a global claim, the reason courts allow it, is the argument that it is physically impossible to link a specific cause to a specific effect.
Right, you can't track the individual raindrops.
The physical and logistical inability to separate the overlapping events. But look at the rapid evolution of technology on job sites right now.
Oh, it is changing everything.
It is. We are seeing the rise of artificial intelligence analyzing project data. We have digital twin modeling, where a virtual real-time replica of the building tracks every single physical change.
And automated drone tracking.
Exactly. Drones that can perfectly record every hammer swing, every delayed delivery truck, and every weather event on a massive site down to the exact second.
The data collection is incredible.
So the question is, as digital tools create perfect, undeniable, contemporaneous records of every moment on a site, will that impossibility of linking cause and effect eventually disappear entirely? Will modern technology be the thing that finally kills the global claim forever?
You would naturally assume so, right? But technology has a persistent habit of complicating things just as much as it clarifies them.
How do you mean?
Well, while an automated drone might perfectly track the physical reality of every raindrop, that mountain of data still has to be interpreted. In a multi-billion-dollar dispute, lawyers aren't going to just accept the software's conclusion. They will end up arguing over the AI's algorithm, the data inputs, and the digital parameters. The impossibility of untangling the mess might simply shift from human disorganization to digital complexity.
That is a terrifying thought.
Instead of arguing over missing paper receipts, we might end up with dueling AIs arguing over which overlapping delay was the dominant cause.
A completely new kind of tangled web. Well, next time you walk past that massive delayed construction site, take a moment to look up at the cranes. You aren't just looking at a mess of steel and concrete.
You really aren't.
You are looking at a high-stakes arena where physics, international finance, and the absolute limits of the law are colliding every single day.
And where the rules of engagement are constantly being rewritten.
Thanks for diving deep with us today.